You see, when I mean, things happen for you when you least expect it. Isn't that great? Found the lions, thought they'd probably moved around this side of the drainage line, and look at this, everybody, right here. Oh, wonderful. Well, Brian, I think that's us for the afternoon. Oh, great. I was still trying to have a look for tracks over there. They just moved out of the drainage line. So where we saw them earlier, well, this morning, they've moved out and they've moved further east. They are now lying in the shade of a very big marula tree. And it's very kind of them to come out of the drainage line for us. Makes it a bit easier to see them. Looks like all the cubs, 1, 2, 3, 4 females, and that big male. I think I may update the others shortly. So all the way from Australia, Pokemon Guy wants to know, do these cats purr like domestic cats? No, they don't. Not at all. The only big cat which does purr is the cheetah, which is quite interesting. So the cheetah does purr. It does give off a... It sounds like a cat purr, obviously a bit louder, but the cheetah can purr, but the leopards and lions, they do not. They do not purr. And I would assume it's got something to do with that cartilage within the voice box of the lions and in the leopards, which allow them to roar. And I think that's also why they are part of the Panthera family, whereas a cheetah is not. A cheetah is a different family, even though it is a big cat, but it is not part of the Panthera family. One of the characteristics of Panthera is that they can roar. They've got this this cartilage in the voice box which they're able to vibrate, and a bone. And is it the I've forgotten now. I've hit a complete blank. Is it the thyroid bone? Hyroid. That's it, a hyroid apparatus. I was close. Hyroid. It's a hyroid apparatus, and that's how these lions are able to make that wonderful deep roar and that sound. Hyroid is almost like a floating bone which vibrates and vibrates against the cartilage within the voice box, and that causes that very loud roar. Just going to update everyone else quickly. The stations located the Nkuhuma Pride plus a single coalition member. They are lying on Central Road, very close to the junction with Gowrie Cut Line. Affirmative, affirm. Just off the road under a marula tree. And you see, I spoke about it this morning, everyone. We were tracking and trying to find leopard, and we saw tracks, but it was very difficult for us to actually find them. And James managed to get a glimpse of a female leopard walking across our boundary because the monkey's alarm called and alerted him to where she was. And excuse me a second. copy that. It's just myself here. You can make your way straight in. And as I was saying that, you know, at times you can drive around and try and track these animals and spend hours. Excuse me, sorry everyone. Everyone's looking for an update quickly. The Nkuhuma Pride and a single coalition member, they're lying just off of Central Road, close to the junction with Gowrie Cutline. So as I was saying that, you know, this morning we had tracks and we were trying to find these leopards, but we didn't have any luck. And I said, you know, you can track for hours and really not come across anything. And then all of a sudden, you drive around like we did this afternoon, couldn't find the lions, drove around, got to some water holes and came back into the area to look for them and bumped into them just off the road. And it does happen like that sometimes when you do get lucky and the animals play along and don't make it that difficult. So it is wonderful to see them out in the open. Lynn, you've asked if all the cubs are here. It looks like they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can only see 6 at the moment, Lynn, but it's difficult to see behind these lionesses at the moment. I think they are all here. I'll try to keep a lookout and just let you know when I do count all of them. But it looks like they are all here. Alright, we're going to spend some time with these lions. Hopefully they move around a little bit later, but while we sit here and enjoy this, Taylor's got a tall giraffe she'd like to show you. And these lovely Nkuhumas are still resting. The lionesses have picked their heads up. I don't know, you know what everyone, I don't know if I saw something moving through the back, through the thicket. Let me just have a look with my binoculars. No, perhaps I'm wrong. I may be mistaken, just because both those lionesses lifted their heads and they kind of looked in towards that thicket behind them. Don't see anything. I heard some oxpeckers. And they're resting again. Little cubs enjoying the William, it is interesting that they're all lying so close to the male, and I wonder why. Again, it just shows you, you know, that these animals, their behavior changes regularly, and there's never a right or wrong answer or a guaranteed answer when it comes to the like lions and that. The other day we saw the male specifically went and lay 30 meters away. So what is the reason for them all lying together now? I don't know. A bug flying around us. I must admit, it's very calming sitting watching these lions. Very relaxing. I think, look at that little cub going to see if it can suckle a little bit. I'm sure the female might get a little bit upset because it is so hot. Look at the other lioness. She just got up and rubbed up against the one on the right. They are always very affectionate, these lions, and the reason for that is they maintain the bonds between or within the pride, and especially these lionesses, they're very, very close because they rely so much on each other. For one is because of hunting. You know, if they do go off hunting, then they make sure that they know exactly what the other ones are doing and they work together as a team to hunt. And then also, if they have cubs, you know, these lionesses do occasionally suckle one another's cubs. So that often these lionesses give birth around the same time, and there's more chance of the cubs surviving because there are more females looking after them. So that little cub is trying to suckle a little bit, but I think it's pushing its luck to an extent. Dubs Racing would like to know, why do these lionesses not get named like some of the leopards do? Now, how am I going to answer? So I think one of the reasons is because these lionesses are a little bit harder to tell apart as opposed to leopards who are solitary and who have specific territories. With a group of lionesses like this, or with the pride rather than these lionesses within the pride, it's not as easy to tell each lioness apart unless you really have a good look. So they're usually referred to as a pride because they are generally together. To be completely honest with everyone, is I'm not sure, and I had this conversation with James the other day. I'm not sure how I feel about naming the animals. And I'll tell you why. So before anyone shouts at me, and it's just a conversation to have. So these animals that we are viewing are wild animals, and we're just very fortunate that we are in this area on a daily basis, and we do get to see the prides and we get to see the leopards fairly regularly because they are territorial. So we get to know them, and it is nice for us to build up characters for these lions and leopards because you do get to see them on a regular basis. I have just always guided, and you must remember a lot of the guests that I've guided in the past come out on safari once in a lifetime perhaps, or maybe they're fortunate enough and they come out a few times, but every time they come out it's a new experience and they are seeing new animals, new lions, new leopards. Now for me, my thinking is that it is a wonderful experience to view a magnificent male lion or a magnificent pride of lions. They are wild animals, and I just think that at times we need to be sensitive to naming animals because we anthropomorphize them to an extent. And I know some people might be disagreeing with me, and that's 100% okay. And I do, know the names of these prides, and I do refer to them by their names because that's what they've been given, and that's part of getting to know these lions and their territories and how they move within their territories. But usually for first-timers coming out on safari, driving around, I think, and seeing the I don't know, Rambo, the male leopard, I think is not as good an experience as opposed to seeing this beautiful male leopard that is just here, that we are witnessing and viewing. I think you take away a little bit from the experience, but like I said, it's a personal feeling about naming animals and in certain areas, but I do understand that it does play a role, and I guided in an area where we named and we recognized all the leopards because they are territorial and because we were out there regularly. But I would not necessarily tell the guests that this is the Campan male, for example, who was a dominant male leopard around. I would say this is a dominant male leopard. That's it, which is what he is. But guests who came regularly and would see these leopards regularly, we would then go into the names because they then understand more about the animals, and also it just gives them something to, and like all our viewers, it gives you something to refer to when you are viewing them. James, and I discussed it the other day, and he was saying, if you think about Cecil the lion, that terrible story about Cecil the lion up in East Africa. He said, and he made a fantastic point, that because that lion had been named and been seen so much, did more for lion conservation than many of the different lion conservation trusts, because it was a recognized lion, and because social media was so big, and there was such basically a stand against lion hunting. So it is so important. So I understand that, but again, it's something that I'm very careful with, is that I don't just go and say this is this lion and this is this leopard, because I do think it is important that we maintain these are wild animals, and we're going to get lions coming into this area, challenging these lions, possibly killing the males, perhaps threatening the cubs at some point. We're not going to know who they are, where they came from, but they are lions. They're male lions. They're another pride, perhaps. So that's why I think, in this greater Kruger area, for example, there are many lions, there are many leopards that we don't know, and we will get them passing through at times. So, yeah, it's just something that I think about occasionally. Not saying I'm right or anyone's wrong. It's just a personal preference at times. But in these situations, we're seeing these prides regularly, and the Nkuhuma Pride is a huge role, they play a huge role on Djuma, because they are the dominant pride. We see very few other lions, as opposed to the Styx Pride now and then. So, I do understand that, and it is nice to get to know them. Anyway, you can let me know your thoughts, and it'll be interesting to see what you think and how you feel about it. I know a lot of our viewers love seeing these animals, and it's anyway, something different to think about, everyone. Jason, you have sent in a comment, and you say you agree with me. Thank you. And you say it is a slippery slope, and we do have to be careful. And I do agree with you, because, as you say, Jason, this is not a Disney movie. These are wild animals, and we are just very fortunate that we are in a position to be able to view them and show them to the world, and showcase these animals to all our viewers around the world, which is a wonderful, wonderful privilege. And that I think is exactly it. It's a privilege that we're able to see these animals. Look at those little cubs playing. Isn't that wonderful? I love watching cubs. They're just always doing something, and they're very playful. Look at those paws. Oh, that is great. Reminds me of a joke, and I'm not sure the ladies in the FC say my jokes could either be hit or miss at times. But a big male lion walks into a bar one day, and he sidles up to the bar, and he plonks himself on the stool, and he drops his massive arms or legs on the front of the bar counter. And he says to the bartender, I'll have a Coke and ice. And the bartender looks at him and says, why the big paws? Kirsten giggled a little bit, and then the radio went dead. So I think if you can't laugh at yourself, then you, you shouldn't tell jokes. Bree said, "Oh, what a dad joke." Is that a dad joke? Look at these two. These two are wide awake at the moment. Oh, rolling around, falling on the mother, paws on their back. Just playing. Oh, and so those claws are so sharp. Every now and then you see a claw get stuck into in the face. Oh, wonderful! Look at that. When they do grab each other, and we saw it the other day, these little cubs, when they feed, they get very aggressive with each other, not just with each other, but also with the females, with the lionesses. And these paws start swinging, and the next thing, I mean, we saw a few times, the cubs, their claws getting caught on the mother's face and pulling quite hard. It must be quite painful, I think. Incredibly sharp little claws. An injury on the one lioness. Now, just on her back, above the tail, and that's possibly just maybe one of the males, perhaps around a kill. I think maybe one of the males got a bit aggressive and bit her. That does happen, everyone. It happens quite regularly when they are feeding, and we saw, I mean, we spoke about it with the kill. Was it yesterday morning, I think? How these lions get very aggressive with each other when they are feeding. Look, you can actually see those sharp claws. Look at that, everyone. On that little cub. Wow, isn't that amazing? And they've got retractable claws. So those muscles tense and those claws come out. And I think because that cub is trying to hold on to that little stick, that's why we can see the claws coming out. The dew claw, which is almost best described, I would say, as a thumb claw. Very, very big. There you can just see it above the leaf. And then the other, there we go. Look at that. That's a lovely view of it. It's out at the moment. And look at those sharp teeth too. Interesting. All right, we're going to stay with the lions. Hopefully they start waking up more, the adults, and there's just a bit of movement from the cubs, everyone, but the lionesses and the male have hardly moved. The male rolled over, but that's about it. Still resting. It's still very warm, everyone, and that's why I think these lions are still so comfortable. There's no need for them to move just yet. Look at that little cub on its back. Just having a good look at us. Well, it appears as if it is. A little stretch. A bit of a breeze, but it's still very, very muggy. The temperature is still quite warm. A lot of birds calling. We've got francolins calling in the drainage line. It's very peaceful, though. It's very, very peaceful. Michael, you want to know if the other lionesses have cubs. Will these older cubs try and suckle from them, even though they have been weaned? Michael, they may possibly take a chance, but I think what would happen is that lioness with those new cubs would most likely be quite aggressive to these older cubs, and she won't let them suckle. I think she would make sure that she only suckles her cubs in this situation because these are so much older. I'm not saying that it would never happen, because again, as we've seen many times, things happen in the bush that we're not often used to. So I think in this situation, if that other lioness gives birth to cubs, the other thing is, if that lioness gives birth to cubs now, she'll probably wait about 2 months before she introduces those little cubs to the pride. That's usually what happens. That's the average. And then, so you can imagine 2 months' time, these cubs will be even bigger, and probably less reliant on milk, or even taking less chances of suckling. So by that stage, I'm sure that it will be highly unlikely that they go and try and suckle from that lioness. Some vehicles just arrived and the flashes are going off. They're really enjoying this lion sighting, and they're very lucky because it was a warm day. I mean, for us to find these lions out in the open, it's a wonderful spot. We can give them their space and everybody can have a lovely view of them, which is great. So everyone is getting to enjoy them. I wonder, we heard the lions calling last night a few times, which is always nice to hear, possibly the male. And these males call quite regularly, and the reason is they're letting other lions know that this is their territory, and also possibly just to communicate with each other and find out where the other males are within their territory, just so they know. As I said, it's actually so peaceful just sitting watching these lions. Oh, there's some flies bothering that lioness. So Low Key has asked us, is there any situation or circumstance where we would interfere with the animals and help them? Now, I know this has been a subject that has come up for discussion a few times with all our viewers, especially regarding the mange. So Low Key, generally not. And it goes back to the conversation I had earlier with all of you about the lions and naming animals and that. We need to realize we are here to view these animals. We are not here to interfere. And it is difficult at times because you do almost build a bit of a relationship with these animals because you are seeing them on a regular basis. But we would not interfere if these animals get injured or, for example, with the mange. And the reason for that is they are wild animals, and this is nature, everyone. It's not our place to interfere. We are purely here to view and appreciate these animals and try and keep out of their natural lives as much as possible. And this is a natural system. We need to understand that this is nature's way of managing numbers and managing the wildlife. If animals get injured, if they get hurt, if it causes or if it's a major injury that causes death, it happens for a reason, and it's nature's way of managing basically the gene pool, so that the strongest and most successful lions are able to basically survive. So you have survival of the fittest. The best genes will then continue. So in saying that though, the only time we would interfere or try and help the animals is if they were injured due to man. So if there was, for example, in some parts of the national parks, closer to the fence lines, closer to communities, there are perhaps people that come in and obviously poachers and that, which may still get in at times. If an animal is injured, he's got his tongue out, hasn't he? If these animals are injured because of people, then we would call in a vet, and we would try and help the animal, because that is not natural. That has not been caused naturally. So that is different. If the animal is injured because of man, then we may intervene to try and help them, and it's purely because it was not a natural incident. But anything else, if a lion runs into a tree stump and cuts itself, or damages its leg, it happens for a reason. But in saying that, all these animals have the amazing ability to heal very, very well. And I've seen lions, I've seen leopards, where what we've done in the past, and a nice example is a female leopard that we saw, and she was a very well-known leopard, and we saw her regularly on Londolozi, where I used to work. And this leopard had moved through an area and was possibly hunting, and she cut her leg badly, almost from her shoulder right down, and cut right around. It was very, very bad, and I assume she must have been running through a thicket and hit a stump, and it cut her. And we really thought that this may be the end of her. And we actually just zoned the area that we knew she was moving through, so that nobody went and interfered or pushed her and caused her to move or anything like that. And also, we need to be careful. If you track animals like that, when they're injured, they could act aggressively. So you try and give them their space. Within, I think it was 2.5, 3 weeks, this leopard had almost completely healed. It was incredible. Just by cleaning the wound and taking it easy, not being pushed and moving too much, her wound had healed up quite nicely, and a month later it was completely healed. So it's amazing how these big cats have the ability to heal. Not just big cats, all animals. They do heal very well. If you think, I know James, I think it was this morning or yesterday, he had a zebra that had some serious scars on the rump. You could see the lines of the stripes weren't matching up, and that's probably from lions that caught on and tore the zebra's hindquarters, but that zebra healed completely fine. So the thing is, you've got to remember, we can't interfere, not from a natural incident. These animals are able to heal very, very quickly and very well. Their immune system, all of that is very good. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. I think what we're going to do is possibly sit here for another minute or two, everyone. Just enjoy these lions. Maybe just do a loop around this area, see what else we can find quickly, see if there's anything else moving around, and then possibly come back just as the sun goes down and starts getting a bit darker. And maybe we're lucky and we see some movement. Ray, you're asking if the flash from the cameras bother these animals. Now, Ray, fortunately there's still a lot of light around, and it most likely doesn't bother them at the moment. The one thing though, and I've always told guests of mine, is that we do need to be careful and respectful of the animals at night time. Flash photography, it can get a bit much. 2 or 3 photographs I don't think are bad, but in the evenings, you have to be more sensitive, because those bright flashes, it's like us. Now, if you think of a flash going off in your eyes, it affects our eyes. Now, you can imagine these lions that have very sensitive eyes, the flashes will definitely affect them. So we do try and be, or at least I try to be very respectful of the animals and careful, and let the guests know that we need to be sensitive. But also at night you don't really get great photographs, even if you're using the flash. So the best thing at times is just enjoy the sighting. I know it's important and wonderful to get fantastic pictures of the animals, but I think occasionally people lose sight of what's actually going on in front of them. They lose the feeling of the actual sighting because they're busy looking through their lens the whole time. So it's nice to get pictures for a while, get lovely pictures. Once you've got them, sit and enjoy the sighting, especially in the evening, so not too much or not too many flashes going off. Anyway, I think let's do a little loop, and while I do that, let's head back to Taylor and see what she's up to. They've moved around a little bit, and they're actually rolling in some dung just off to the left of the vehicle. That's possibly just to mark their scent a little bit. Lions do that. They'll roll around in elephant or rhino or buffalo dung, and just to mask their scent from prey. So getting back to the overpopulation of animals, apparently elephant do overpopulate certain areas, but I think now with some of the game reserves opening up and extending, it's not as much of a problem, but they do still need to monitor it. And, you know, it comes down to the age-old issue and debate in that man has intervened in the past with setting up fences and creating these game reserves to protect the animals and the people that live outside, but also we now have to manage it because of that. So the national parks boards will get together. They will make decisions on elephant populations and what is needed to be done. But like I say, I am not too certain where they are with conversations about that at the moment. See, they're all starting to wake up, clean themselves, groom themselves. Which is a good sign. There we go. Isn't this wonderful? Just looking for the spotlight, everyone. It's not it. Oh, look, everybody. Oh, wow. I didn't know these lions were mating. Wow, look at that. So, I mean, this morning I don't think there was any mating. So that's very interesting. Oh, so there was mating this morning. Okay, Kirsten just confirmed that with me. I didn't realize that. Okay, so we didn't see it. Apparently it was just before the drive, and I think, oh, look at that. I think you may have seen it on the dam cam, perhaps. So that's very interesting, because the last little while we've been seeing these males following the lionesses around, but we haven't actually seen them mating. So that is interesting. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was another male that was following a lioness around. But wasn't that interesting to see the mating? So for those of you who are wondering, was that proper mating session? Is that all that happens? And yes, that is it. It is very, very quick, but it can be quite effective, as we can see these little cubs playing. Usually what happens with the lions is when they are mating seriously, they will mate for a period of about 3 days to a week, and they will mate fairly regularly in the beginning stages. So roughly between every 10 to 20 minutes, somewhere around there, they will mate. Have a look, this female's moving again, just in front of us, and that male's following her. So, Bill, you want to know why these animals mate regularly, and I'll explain to you as this lioness walks past me. Close on. Here comes the male. Just going to keep my voice down. He's yawning. Sorry, I don't want to move too much. And they are lying right behind us. Did you hear that? Right behind us. So, Bill, they mate regularly because the constant mating, and that's why in the beginning stages they mate very regularly, every 10 to 15 or 20 minutes. And as the days go on, the period between each mating session becomes longer. The reason for that is the mating induces ovulation. So there's more chance of the females mating, and that is why they mate on a regular basis. So there's a more chance of the females falling pregnant. We are now boxed in, everybody. These lions are right behind us and right in front of us. Brian, have you got enough water? We definitely won't need blankets. It's warm enough tonight. So if we do have to spend the night out here. Bless you. Now there's a wonderful quote, and I hope I can remember it correctly. It is by a lady named Karen Blixen, and I think she was a lady from out of Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Oh gee, where's James now when you need him, because he'd probably correct me, but I think she wrote out of Africa, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check for you, but the quote goes something along the lines of, it is until you have lived amongst lions that you truly feel alive in Africa. It's something along those lines. I think it's such a powerful quote. And I'm just thinking of that now, having these lions surrounding us. It's an incredible feeling, and it's hard to describe to all of you. Alright, we're going to sit with these lions a bit longer. They're starting to get active. Let's head back to Taylor. I think she's got another hippo out of the water. So I just double-checked everyone. I double-checked myself. And Karen Blixen, she was an author and she wrote Out of Africa, very famous novel based in, I think it was Kenya or Tanzania. And she said, you know you are truly alive when you are living among lions. And I think that's such a powerful quote. And I think it was because part of the time while she was writing, I think she did spend a lot of time in Africa and got to see wild lions on a regular basis. Look at those two playing. These two behind us have not moved. It's difficult. I don't think we'd actually get them in frame for you because they are right behind us, the male and the female, but the rest of the pride and the little cubs are getting very active now. Look at that. That's a Skopsal call. And then the beautiful fiery-necked nightjar. One of these sounds I think that most associated with Africa too. The fiery-necked nightjar. Kirsten is impressed with that one. Thank you, Kirsten. That's the fiery-necked nightjar, everyone. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. And these nightjars sit on the roads in the evenings because they hunt the insects. Obviously, the roads hold a lot of warmth from the day. You get a lot of insects wandering around, and then these nightjars come down, they sit on the road, and they try and catch these insects. Leilani, you asking if I've ever seen a lioness give birth? No, never. And I don't know of many people that have. And one of the reasons is, just like leopards, these lions are very secretive when they do give birth. And the reason for that is they go and they find a den site. So an area that they can give birth to their cubs and hide them very, very well. And it's usually an area that's thick, it's not easily accessible. So when they do move off and give birth, it's very, very unlikely that anybody would see it. And usually what happens is we'll find the lion very pregnant one day, and the next day you can see that she has given birth, flat stomach, then you know. But seeing the actual birth, I think, is very rare, and I don't think anybody has seen a live birth in the wild. I know very, very few people that I even think may have seen one. I don't know of anybody that has seen, so I think it's highly unlikely because of the way, or because of how secretive they are, and purely because they hide them in a den site. And they'll stay in that den site for 6 weeks, somewhere around there, before they decide to move them. 6 to 8 weeks, and then maybe move them to perhaps another den site, or just another area, and then eventually they'll introduce them to the pride, and the cubs will start moving around with the pride. And then as they move, the lions will leave the cubs in an area, go off hunt, and then return and fetch the cubs. And we've seen that Karula, the female leopard in the area, she does that. She has hidden her cubs. Well, she moved den sites a few times, and now she's taking the cubs around with them. And what she does now is she'll just leave them in an area, go off and hunt, and come back and fetch the cubs and take them to the kill. I can hear pearl-spotted owl starting to call. Oh, listen to the sound, everyone. The lions are just little cubs were play fighting. So I can hear a pearl-spotted owl in the distance. It's quite far. I don't think you'd be able to hear it. It's got a wonderful whistling call. That's the pearl-spotted owl, a tiny little owlet that we get in this area. Another vehicle coming to enjoy the lions with us. Good evening, everyone. Good. Deborah, all the way from South Carolina, wants to know how or what age will these little cubs be considered normal lions within the pride? So, Deborah, it's difficult to say. Generally, if you think of when lion cubs start joining in on the hunt and that, it's usually from the age of about 2 years old. They still will be quite inexperienced, but they will possibly follow the lionesses, the adults around, and then try and help with the hunt. We saw the other day when we saw these lions hunting that buffalo not far from Vuyatelapan, with these little cubs jumping on the back while the lionesses were pulling it down. So already at this age they were learning, but they're nowhere near ready to mate with, to hunt with the lionesses. But on average, from about 2 years to 2.5 years, that's when they really start learning how to hunt and probably join in on the hunt. And I would say from that age, they most likely seen to be considered adults within the pride, very close to that. And usually lionesses, young lionesses, will mate from about 3 years old, 3.5 years old. They'll start mating with males. They might not necessarily be successful with the mating, but they will start mating from that age. As I said, we're still completely surrounded by lions. There's still 2 lying directly behind the vehicle. While we sit it out a little bit longer, let's head back to Taylor and see what she's up to. So Taylor, I am still stuck between these lines. We have not been able to move because they're still lying right behind us. It's not a bad thing. It's too soon to panic. We're not getting nervous just yet. And these lion cubs are getting more active, everyone, which is fantastic. There's been a bit of chasing and jumping on one another. And I wonder if these lionesses are possibly going to hunt tonight. We know they've been so successful the last week or 2 weeks actually with hunting buffalo, and I think any buffalo that comes into this area is potentially in a lot of danger. See, they're all spread out now. They've moved around quite a bit compared to when we found them this afternoon, all lying in a bunch close to each other in the shade of that marula tree. That little one playing with the dung. And again, you know, we were chatting about how these lions, these little lions, play in the dung, roll around in the dung. And these little cubs, I think, are just being playful, but the adults will often do it just to mask their scent slightly. And we see it also with leopards. Leopards on a regular basis will walk around and roll in buffalo dung. And one of the theories behind them doing that is to mask their scent. And I think it's exactly why these lions do it too. Kelly from Texas, you'd like to know if the interaction, well, with the people being around these lions on a regular basis, will it affect them when they do get older? And Kelly, no, I don't think so. I think it will be just like we are viewing these lionesses at the moment, that they know the vehicle is no threat and no danger to them, but there's you know, from what I've seen with many different prides, there's no way that these little cubs will just become comfortable with people being around. Yes, perhaps the vehicles, and they've become habituated to the vehicles because they know there's no threat or danger, and that is why we're so fortunate that we have these lions around us at the moment. But if I had to get out the vehicle now, perhaps these lions would definitely react to me. One, either run away because they would get a fright, or two, and I think this is probably what would happen, is they would most likely act very aggressively towards me because there are cubs around. And that would be exactly the same with these cubs when they grow up and they are a bit older. So they will be relaxed like the lionesses are around the vehicles, but still very wary of the vehicles because there is still a bit of fear within these lions towards the vehicles, which is good, which is what we want. We don't want them to get that comfortable that they just walk up to the vehicles. That would potentially be a dangerous situation. And I say that even though there are two lions lying right behind us, but I think if I made a noise, they'd move off. Cat in Tampa, you asked, can we spotlight the cubs at the moment? So I've actually just got the vehicle lights on, Cat. I don't have the spotlights on them. And again, we do try to be a little bit more sensitive. These cubs are old enough now, and with these lionesses around and the big male, there's actually no threat or danger to them at the moment. Usually what happens is if the cubs are alone, or if there's maybe one lioness with the cubs, we try not shine the light on them because you may attract the attention of possibly other predators like hyena. And hyena, we do know, will harass lions and kill cubs if they do come across them. So in the evenings we are sensitive, and once it gets dark we leave young cubs alone and females. But at the moment, with the whole pride together and the male close by, there's almost no chance of any predators coming close because these lions will all protect these little cubs. So even though we're not spotlighting them and we just got the vehicle lights on, because we also want to be sensitive towards their eyes, but there's no threat of attracting other predators into this area. There's that beautiful fiery necked nightjar calling again in the distance. It's a wonderful sound. A Scops owl calling too. All these wonderful evening sounds that we can hear at the moment, everybody. Really is fantastic. Still a very warm night. And I hope it cools down, otherwise it's going to be tricky to sleep. What do you think, Brian?
Very much so.
I can hear branches breaking in the distance too, elephants moving around. So there's still a lot of activity going on in the evening. So I hope Taylor has some luck with finding a chameleon this evening, because we will not be able to find one because we're stuck between the lions. Oh, look at that. This little cub's still very playful. Anyway, everybody, I think that's about it from myself and Brian this afternoon, or evening. Thank you very much, Brian, and the thumb. It's tough to see the thumb in the evening. We hope you've enjoyed it with us. It's been wonderful having you on our drive again, and